welcome everybody to this Asia Institute seminar on May 19th, 2022 on the subject of President Biden's visit to Seoul and Tokyo, meaningful strategies for US, Korea, Republic of Korea, Japan, trilateral cooperation. My name is Emmanuel Pastreich, president of Asia Institute here in Seoul for the last now almost 13 years. And we're
말씀해보세요.
to have,
눌러주세요. 네네. 네네.
we're honored to have a distinguished group of experts to discuss the larger implications of this visit, which takes place not in a vacuum, but in the midst of a variety of tremendous challenges, whether it's the crisis in the Ukraine, the enormous degree of financial instability, the threat of military and competition, and the uncertainty of what exactly the global system order of things will be going forward in East Asia and throughout the world. So we'll, in terms of our discussion, we'll start out with each of our members of our discussion here speaking for 5 to 10 minutes about his perceptions of the significance of this visit and the agenda, and then we'll go through one more time for a follow-up discussion, and then for follow-up statements, and then have an open, free discussion. So let's start. Since Larry Wilkerson has not joined us yet, I'll start with John Pfeffer, back in Washington, D.C., Director of Foreign Policy and Focus, and of course, my close associate for the last, 16, 17 years. John, your insights.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and it's a pleasure to be with you all this morning or evening, depending on which side of the Pacific you are on. I'm sure that you have more insights into what will happen in this first visit that Joe Biden is kind of taking to Asia. As we all know, this is an effort by the Biden administration to demonstrate that it still cares about Asia. There has been, a lot of focus on Ukraine, on Europe, on NATO, on COVID, on US domestic policy, on immigration, on everything, it seems, except Asia. But the Biden administration, like the Obama administration, has been eager to demonstrate that Asia is important to the United States. And Asia is important, obviously, in two main ways. One, our alliances, US alliances with partners like South Korea and Japan and the larger Quad. But it's also important for a negative way, and that is because China remains the primary hegemonic challenge to the United States. So what can we expect from this visit? Nothing dramatic, I'm sure, nothing tremendously new. The United States is interested in, of course, cementing the relationship with South Korea on both economic and security matters. On the economic side, the United States has launched, a number of different initiatives to try to inject the United States back into Asian economic affairs. Obviously, Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the United States has this, almost crazy idea to create yet another trade consortium, even after Japan has picked up, the thread of the TPP. The United States still has this, idea that it will create a kind of Pacific economic trade area. On top of that, it has created something called the Blue Dot Network. Blue Dot Network is this kind of economic counterpart to the Quad, the Quadrilateral network. And the Blue Dot Network is essentially an attempt to kind of create a alternative to the Belt and Road Initiative, except it's an alternative without any money. I mean, it's kind of crazy. People like the Belt and Road Initiative because it provides countries with money, with financing. Whereas the Blue Dot Network really doesn't provide much of anything other than already existing financing. So it's not really an exciting, shall we say, venture for countries to participate in. So that's on the economic side. I think that Biden is hoping that that Yoon will enthusiastically embrace both of these economic options, but much depends really on the security side, because I think this is what Yoon is really interested in, maybe not as much in the economic ideas that the Biden administration has. Obviously, South Korea is not a member of the Quad of, India, Japan, Australia, the United States. And so it feels a little left out. And of course, Biden will be participating in a Quad meeting while he's there. So that only emphasizes South Korea's absence from this network. So some kind of a signal that South Korea is firmly on board in this kind of effort by the United States to both contain China in very explicit terms, but also to isolate Russia. And I think the Biden administration was a little disappointed by Moon Jae-in and his lack of enthusiasm for isolating Russia. And so it's likely that Yoon will be more enthusiastic about isolating Russia. And so there will be some agreement there, I suspect, between the two. There's going to, of course, be some discussion of THAAD and missile defense and how to deal with China. I'm not going to go into those details. I'm sure somebody else will. And obviously, there will be discussions very specifically about the bilateral relationship, security relationship, the military alliance. And I'm not going to go into those details. To keep to my 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to instead just focus on two kind of wishful thinking ideas from my perspective. I call them wishful thinking because I don't honestly think they're going to come up in any real sense. The first one, though, has better chance. The first one, of course, is the provision of vaccines to North Korea. As we all know, North Korea has rejected COVID vaccines, but the expectation is, or the rumor is, that Pyongyang was simply not happy with inferior vaccines. For those of us who have worked with North Korea, we know that they are very sensitive about receiving anything that is perceived as inferior. So an offer of Moderna or Pfizer vaccines, I think, would be accepted, especially if there's not a lot of oversight connected to the delivery of those vaccines. And the United States and South Korea should do it not out of charity, but out of pure self-interest, because we know that a unvaccinated population of 25 million people can be an enormous breeding ground for new variants of the vaccine that will then be unleashed upon the world. And that's the last thing we want. So really providing North Korea with these vaccines is in the interests of the United States, South Korea, and every other country. Finally, the other question really is this issue between Russia and China. Now, the Biden administration has taken a kind of conventional view, which is, well, to isolate both of them. I mean, to contain China militarily and to isolate Russia completely. And has tried to persuade China to go along with the isolation of Russia and has not talked to Russia at all about China. But if one wants to be realpolitik about this, this is an enormous Kissinger moment again that presents itself to the United States, a moment which I suspect the Biden administration will not take advantage of. But Here's an opportunity for the Biden administration to say, okay, look, let's turn a page with China. Let's cooperate fully with China on a range of issues, in part because it's important to do so. Yes, on climate issues, for instance, on piracy questions, intellectual property rights, et cetera, et cetera. But the more important kind of realpolitik opportunity is exactly what happened during the Nixon administration. In other words, an overture to China to isolate, at that time, the Soviet Union, this time to isolate Russia. What a golden opportunity the Biden administration could take advantage of and drive a wedge right between Moscow and Beijing. Whether Biden is smart enough or his advisors are smart enough to take that kind of a geopolitical risk, I doubt it. But that's a possibility that looms on the horizon. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for your insights, and we will follow up on those particular two proposals or suggestions in the second round. So, Dr. Shin, your insights.
Well done. Okay, hold on.
Please.
As you see in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that imperialist aggression is still underway in modern human history in the 21st century. Despite this kind of some imperial aggression, the free world is unable to provide active military support for fear of being certain in the new world war again. So the international community is simply supporting only munitions in an indirect form of support. In other words, it shows that the international community is still afraid of to unite and protect the freedom. So, so we, as a Korean, we also very afraid of this kind of things happened in the world. Even though Korea has some military or alliances with the U.S. or some value system, alliance system with Japan, but still, if we have another war in the Korean Peninsula, and we are very afraid of not being supported by the U.S. or by Japan or other international societies. And also, this kind of things about China. It seems that China has not yet escaped from some trauma of the 1842, the Treaty of Nanjing, the invasion of imperialism. So they are still haunted by the ghost of the Nanjing imperialism or their fears. And also China's some diplomatic policy or some international policy is very not desirable. I mean, China's development of the construction industry reached its limit, and then they established some strategy to pioneer overseas construction markets. Especially Xi Jinping urged developing countries to build their infrastructure, such as roads and ports, through the so-called Belt and Road Initiative. And then China persuaded those developing countries by providing loans through the AIIB to finance the construction. But after the construction of the AIB, and then after construction of One Belt, One Road, and then all the debts as a fall to the developing countries. There's no benefit from those infrastructure constructions. And then China is forced the developing countries to manipulate their diplomatic policies, because you are debt. You have a debt, and otherwise have to pay that all out, and then those things. And then those kind of some very some nasty foreign policy of China. And also, China also had dredged reefs in the South China Sea into military bases. And also those things were approved that illegal by the International Court of Arbitration. But China did not receive the verdict. And also they are going to keep dredging those things and make another military air bases also. So I think those Chinese behavior in the international society has to be barred or prohibited by the international society, such as the US and Korea and Japan and Philippines and Vietnam also. Against those Chinese international illegal activities, the United States pursues some kind of value alliance policy for the co-prosperity of humanity. The United States is building a various alliances based on that value system alliances, and also the United States emphasized the need to modernize the alliance to strengthen the unite between the alliances in the field of economy, technology, and information, and many things. And also, the United States also planning to manage the world by further expanding the existing alliance system, such as they are building up on some quadruple alliance systems, which is included by the USA, Australia, Japan, and India, and also the Korea and the new government want to join in the Quad, but they are very hesitant, especially Japan is pushing the Korea out of those Quad. They say, no, the Japan says, no, it's not time for South Korea to join in. We have to strengthen our our powers inside of the Quad, and then not now, maybe later. And then Japan says, Japan is the first country to expel the Korea to be a member of some Quad in these days. And also the US is also wanted to put Korea to the Five Eyes, which is Five Eyes, you know what, okay, and then they say the Five Eyes, they named the Five Eyes and Five Eyes plus plus Korea means, and also those things. And then the Japan also respond to the US foreign policies. So Japan is explaining their foreign policies as a free and open Indo-Pacific policy. In response to this US initiative, the United States, Japan created the policy of free and open Indo-Pacific policy. In particular, Japan argued that it would play the key role. I mean, Japan will play the key role in building a stability and peace in the international community areas by linking two continents, Asia and Africa. Africa is a very fast-growing continent, and also Asia also has a big economic powers. And then the Japan will also will play a key role to connecting the two continents. And also, Japan also recognized the Asian, Indo-Pacific areas very dangerous, caused by the Chinese imperialistic behaviors. China is causing some conflicts with neighboring countries, expanded their territory and then territorial waters, especially in the China. I mean, the Japanese institute sees China like this. China regards the high seas as a blue territory. As China expands the territorial sovereignty over the sea, just as it expands the land territory. And this one is causing a conflict with the neighboring countries. So Japan argued that it should prepare for a conflict with China. In other words, Japan also argued that based on cooperation with the United States, and then Japan should enhance its security capabilities by strengthening relations with the three countries such as India, Indonesia, Australia, and Vietnam, Philippines. But they never mentioned Korea, not yet. Because maybe Moon Jae-in government, I mean, our former government, Moon Jae-in, and the Japan still hate the Moon Jae-in government and still hate some South Korea. But remember this, Korea has been changed, very dramatically changed. I expect that. Okay, then Korea. Asia's future depends on Korean pursuit of prosperity with the international community, including Korea, Japan, and the US, and India, and Indonesia. Also based on some common value system with the international communities, such as United States and Japan, and like this. So I think this strengthening exchange between liberal countries, Korea, Japan, and the United States, India, and Indonesia, that those countries share common values and common strategic goals, promising mutual prosperity. So such a close alliance can develop into a political and economic community like a European Union, I hope. Yeah, so as Korea will, I hope that Korea will play a key role to connect those some international society to build some more prosperous countries, prosperous economic development, and then we might defend China's some illegal and some imperialistic, aggressive foreign policies. Then we will participate in new world by building some common value systems. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shin, for your insightful perspective, Korean perspective, and of course, slightly different perspective on the issue of China's role. So Dr. Singh, Director of the Peace and Security Program here at Asia Institute, and of course, long-time friend and a central figure here in the discourse on diplomacy and security in Korea. Dr. Singh, your perspective.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be with you, all of you. As you know, last 5 years was not so good for Korea-USA relations, even Korea-Japan relations. We have to be honest and accept it that a lot of damage was done in the last 5 years. So President Biden's visit to Korea is happening at a very historical time and very important time. I think it's time to repair, to control the damage done in the last 5 years. So this is a very historic opportunity to reestablish the real alliance between democratic forces. So this is a great opportunity to rebuild the alliance and unite the democratic forces in the region. As you know, we're not living in easy times. Possibility of World War III is very, very real. So President Biden is coming to Asia, despite his being busy dude in European war. So it's a good signal that USA is still paying good attention to East Asia. So we can feel secure, we can feel confident that we have a friend in need. So there are 3 or 4 areas where damage was done in the last 5 years. I'm going to list those areas. I'm going to say what needs to be done. Most important area was North Korea. As you know, South Korea and USA was pulling in different directions. They were opposite directions. So there was no consensus what should be done. What happened, North Korea was able to explore the differences between 2 countries, and they full-fledged their nuclear program ambitions. So time has come when South Korea, Japan, and USA should narrow the gaps on North Korea. So far, there's no institutional mechanism to coordinate their policies. What should be done? So I propose today that President Biden today set up a special institutional mechanism, a special commission, a special committee, where experts from 3 countries can sit and coordinate their policy. And it should be long-term institution, not just one-time sitting. We have to have a long-term, sustainable institutional mechanism so that there's no gaps in the governments of 3 governments. That's the one problem. That's why so today we are facing full-fledged nuclear North Korea. And that is very dangerous for not only for Korea, but for the whole mankind. It happened because of gaps. North Korea was able to exploit the gaps between three countries. And that should not happen. We must learn lessons from this. So South Korea should give up, not USA should give up its right to make policy. You have to sacrifice their own independent right to make policy. And then we can create institutions where 3 countries, Japan, Korea, USA unite, then make a policy. And that policy should be implemented by all of 3. It should be binding decision, not by political decision. No? It should be decided by experts, but should be done on a long-term basis. Now, what is happening? In 5 years, you do one thing, and then the next 5 years, do another thing. So what happens? North Korea fully explored this, and we are losing. We are facing one of the major, strongest nuclear power in our hands. This has to be stopped. Proper coordination, proper policy-making process has to be established. Otherwise, North Korea will win and we will lose. So far, we are now doing just empty talk. There's no proper coordination. So that should not happen. Second most important point, which I want to tell you, is about global challenges, global emergencies. In the last 5 years, there were very less coordination, be it terrorism, be it climate change, be it piracy in the sea, be it in the Indian Ocean. There's no coordination between Korea, Japan, and USA. Again, China was able to expand. If you go to South China Sea, Chinese Navy is everywhere. Why it happened? Because there was no coordination, no proper meeting of minds with 3 countries. This should not happen. China is expanding into Indian Ocean at a super speed fast. If you want to maintain peace and stability, you have to have a proper coordination between three countries. Otherwise, global challenges like terrorism, like a China expansion into South China Sea, into climate change will not work. So far, what is happening? USA is forcing its decision on Korea and Japan. This is not good. Between partners, there should be proper coordination, between proper decision-making process. Just because you are superpower, just because you are rich, you cannot impose your decision on small countries. So USA should learn a lesson from what happened last 5 years. So who gained? China was able to exploit these gaps. And this is costing us, all of us. Whole region has to, if I'm warning you, if 3 countries, Korea, Japan, and USA fail to coordinate in South China Sea, in Indian Ocean, the whole mankind will pay the price. To understand this, you must understand the gravity of the situation we are in. We need a stronger coordination, stronger policy making framework, so that 3 countries can unite as one nation. You know, we are democratic people. We have to sacrifice to some extent our own sovereignty or something, because the times allow us, times wants us to strengthen our cooperation, so that we can unite, protect our fundamental values, our belief system. You know, at stake is a very belief system in which we believe in. So far, because we are pulling into different directions, we are not able to keep peace. So this should not able to continue. You know, so you have to be very careful. What should be done? Global changes are serious. Climate change is serious. Terrorism is serious. South China is serious. Free navigation in the Indian Ocean is serious. There is proper coordination is needed. And I will tell you, don't do it, we are losers. All of us will lose. And President Biden, when it comes to Korea, he should pay proper attention, that he should be ready to listen to Korea and Japan, and try to give a space to these 2 countries to get democracy of the region. So far, USA rarely listen what these two countries are trying to say. They just take a decision and force them themselves. This is not done. In democracy, all countries should be given a proper space, proper attention, and then a decision should be made. So here, President Biden have a historic opportunity to create a mechanism where 3 countries can create policies which works for the whole region. Here also, again, I suggest to you, time has come where President Biden can do a lot of things. Third, and most important, is economic security. Economic security, even though 3 countries are talking about economic security, but so far it's just empty talk. All of 3 countries have a better relation with China than among themselves. And then the result is clear that China is making more money than the rest of us. So security only the name. If you really want security, you have to help each other. You have to buy from each other. We have to strengthen each other's economy. Then you can create economic security. Now, what we are doing, we have a better, more economic trade with China. So we have to create a new institutional mechanism through which we trade more with each other. We protect each other's interest. So again, we are going our own way. This is not good. This is not good. Economic security can be created only when we are ready to sacrifice our economic interest to some extent to accommodate other personal needs. Again, it has to be mutual. So supply chains, we are heavily dependent on China. We have to create supply chains, but supply chains cannot be created in one day. It takes years to create a new source of supply chains, to have a new, mechanism through which we can trade, to protect our shipping lanes in the Indian Ocean. It cannot be done in one day. And then we have to fight against dumping. Dumping is a serious issue because China is able to produce things at a cheaper price, and we are loser. We're losing in the world market. We have to protect. Again, we have to have it clear. There's so many economic issues in which we have to coordinate our policies. Because we are not able to coordinate, China is able to sell more. China is able to expand more. Again, this is happening because there is serious lack of coordination on the economic front. Again, I'm emphasizing, if we really want economic security, if we really want that we should trade with ourselves more, we have to have again, security mechanism, special institutional mechanism through which we trade with each other more. We protect each other's economic interest. Empty talk will not help. Empty talk is helping China. You have to understand, in the last 10, 15 years, China has expanded only because we are not coordinating with each other. We are not trading with each other. So the result is clear that this is happening. And last but not the least is the gap between Korea and Japan. As you know, last 5 years was very bad for Korea and Japan. Both countries was not even talking to each other. And that's what hurting the whole region. But USA was not doing anything. If USA really want to strengthen partnership between Korea and Japan, it has to do something. It has to do something to strengthen the partnership between Korea and Japan. Stronger Korea-Japan tie is the key for future of safety of the region, whole region. But you simply cannot think of a good economic or political or security relation with Korea, Japan, and USA if Korea and Japan are not friends with each other. So, but USA is not investing any energy, any time, any resources to bring these two countries together. So historical issues, historical legacy has to be properly addressed. So when President Biden is here, he should create, once again, I'm telling you, he has to create a kind of institutional mechanism so that these two countries don't go to extreme extent. There could be no peace, no unity if Korea and Japan are not friends. And we have to understand the historical significance, strategic significance of closer ties of Korea and Japan. But USA has failed to play its role in this relationship. So far, they just focus on security issues, other issues, but ignore the historical issues. But historical legacies are serious. They are serious, toxic. They're hurting the relationship between Japan and Korea. So now President Biden is here. He should pay proper attention. He should pay proper attention and try to reconcile the differences between two countries. Until the differences between two countries are not reconciled, we simply cannot imagine a stronger partnership between Korea and Japan, and USA. So this is too important to be ignored. But so far, US is not investing. So my last suggestion is that President Biden, when he's here, he should try to emphasize the point that unity between Korea and Japan is the key for future of mankind. If there's war, we are losers. Korea and Japan must unite together and must forget their historical legacy. There could be no peace, no unity, no democracy, nothing. If Korea and Japan don't unite, we are loser. All of us must understand how important this point is. I cannot emphasize this point enough.
Right.
So this is my last point. I think I have said enough. Thank you very much.
Well, Dr. Singh, I much appreciate your extremely honest assessment of the difficult and both civilizational and also geopolitical and simply political aspects of the current crisis. I wish the United States could live up to your expectations in terms of ability to think strategically and rationally. But sadly, we find ourselves, not just in the United States, but globally, in an age of which we're driven by systems we don't fully understand. And increasingly, people are responding to the pain that they feel because things don't work in an emotional, irrational way that has made the sort of thoughtful discussion that you're suggesting, which makes perfect sense, increasingly difficult. So next, we will ask Mr. Steve Tharp, a long-term resident here in Korea, who's also worked closely with on the United States side as well, for his insights.
Thank you, sir. Just a little background on myself. I'm the newcomer. It seems I'm a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel. I came in the Army as a private in 1976 and came to Korea the first time as a sergeant in 1979. So between 79 and 84, I got a commission and came back as an infantryman. During those 4 years that I was stationed here, I was up near the DMZ and I ran ambush patrols in the DMZ. The goal was to try to kill the bad guys. The Army trained me as a foreign area officer, meaning a Northeast Asia specialist. I wouldn't call it expert, and taught me Chinese and Korean. And then I spent 6 years as a negotiator at the JSA, meeting with the Chinese and North Koreans. The Chinese until they left in 1994. And then I retired in 2004. And I spent 11 years as a Department of the Army civilian running the United States Forces Korea Good Neighbor Program. This was Alliance Building 101 right there. We had such a big problem in 2002. There were a bunch of things that combined to help weaken the ROC-US alliance. Started with the Winter Olympics, an incident there with the Japanese-American speed skater incident. And that was a twofer for the Koreans. It was not only an American, but it was a Japanese-American that they could grow to hate on. And then with the hosting the World Cup, we saw the nationalism continue to grow. It's been my belief over the years that when nationalism gets stronger in the South, anti-Americanism gets stronger as well. It seems to be a zero-sum game. And then during the World Cup, we had the deaths of the two schoolgirls that were run over by an armored vehicle. This got no traction at the time, but after the presidential election, campaigning started in the fall of 2002, then it took off. And the alliance was probably at its worst right then. I was lieutenant colonel here then. And during the last month before the election, we were forbidden to go off base unless we had quarters there. It was it's pretty traumatic. We had our service members being assaulted outside the gate, at least one every day, if not multiple times by Koreans, just no cause, just coming up and assaulting them. It was really bad. And then No Mu-yeon, the result was No Mu-yeon was elected. And so we had a big alliance problem. And the command here said, well, we got to help fix it. And it really wasn't until he was gone that we saw some improvement. Now we're just coming off another bad president. Donald Trump, who probably caused more damage than No Muy Bien ever thought about causing, with jacking the price up on the burden sharing, with just the way he treated South Korea. South Korea was our ally, and here's the guy that's sending love letters to the head commander on the other side. And so, to me, first, we've got to strengthen the ROK-US alliance, and I think this visit does that perfectly. Whoever thought of coming right here, right now, is just brilliant in my mind, because you've got an incoming South Korean president that says, yeah, I want to strengthen the ROK-US alliance. I want to strengthen our ties with Japan. I want to get involved in this economic group that helps counter China. And so the first thing is we have to fix those ROK-US relations, and then we can work on the other corner of the triangle, or the other end of the triangle, the other leg, which is the Japan part. As you may or may not know, and Japan is very critical to the military alliance here, because this is where we would bring reinforcements from the United States, as well as other United Nations command countries, as well as supplies, material, things that we could fight the war with. A lot of people don't realize it, but the United Nations command, and that was the command that was created by MacArthur to fight the war, and had control of all the other UN nation sending forces in it. It still exists today because it's the signatory of the armistice. So that's the one big thing it does. And then the other big thing it does is it keeps that coalition together of these other sending states. And in Japan, it has a status of forces agreement there with the Japanese government, and has 7 US bases designated as UNC bases. So we can pour forces through those bases today with just notification to the Japanese. So the Japanese have already been an important part of this. And one of the things that the United Nations Command has done over the last 15 years or so is taken a lot of South Korean senior officers to see those bases in Japan to get a feel for it. But, we still have problems because of the historical ones. My wife's Korean. One time we were at an embassy, some kind of an embassy function in the mid-90s, and we came home and we're changing clothes, and she goes, "Did you see that woman I was talking to?" Of course, I'm trying to think. And I go, oh, yeah. The Japanese attaché's wife. She goes, "Was she really Japanese?" And I said, "Yeah." So why? She goes, "Wow, that's unbelievable. She was so nice." My wife had grown up, she was born in 1958, had grown up in a time where it just wasn't possible to think of the Japanese in a nice way. And that really changed her mind. Another incident from around that time, when I was attending the Korean Army Staff College, me and the other American officer, we had a period, some days when we weren't allowed to go to class. Classes were classified. We went over to Kojedo to visit the submarine plant there. And my faculty sponsor joined us. And I said, "Why are you building big submarines? That the North Korean threat's more of a ground threat and an air threat. Do you really need submarines?" And he looks over at me and says, "Hey, after we unify, we're going to have maybe an island nation that's our enemy." So when you look at it, when you hear this, you think, okay, there's a lot of mind changing that's got to take place before we can get to that third leg of the triangle. And I see it now with the younger kids. They're much better. They're much more focused on Japan. And so hopefully we can get rid of some of that historical animosity, because Korea and Japan need to join forces together, because they've got a couple common enemies right around in the area. not just North Korea, but China and Russia. And the Chinese and Russians since 2019 have been doing a lot of overflights of both countries' space. And it's really time to come together, create an organization between South Korea and Japan to kind of deal with these violations. And then also, you know, we need continued exercises and trilateral exercises, military exercises would be great. Right now, the best we seem to be able to do is to get both countries into a bigger Pacific type of exercise hosted by US Indo-PACOM. And we need to build more agreements and arrangements like the GSOMIA, I've never learned how to pronounce that. I wasn't an intel guy, I was a policy guy.
I understand.
But those are the key, and really for us to be able to deter, and then if deterrence fails, defend the Republic of Korea. Japan is that bottom of the triangle that we've got to have solid, or the rest of it won't work well. And I hope I didn't talk too long. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Tharp, for joining us today, and I really do appreciate your giving the gritty details of how things work on the ground and your perspective on the significance of this visit and what actually needs to be done. So I'm sorry, Mr. Salai, for keeping you waiting so long, but your perspective, especially Japanese perspective on the significance of President Biden's visit to Seoul and Tokyo is deeply appreciated.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. So today I try to talk about US-Korea-Japan Trilateral Cooperation for Indo-Pacific region, this important Asia time. My name is Ken Sawai, Global Peace Foundation. So actually new Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, the inauguration time, he spoke the word of freedom 35 times in the inauguration speech on May 10th. So the inauguration made a significant for the change, stability, and the cooperation in the region with free democracy and rule of law and human rights in the universal value. That is the US, Korea, Japan, and Asia. So then we could find the possibility of the change, the Quad, I hope the to Penta. So it means Quad plus Korea. The former Moon administration contributed to making peace in the time of fire and fairy time, and also made summits among the top leaders. But the ambiguity of Moon administration direction towards China and North Korea had big confusion in Washington and Tokyo and also in the world. So the key idea of Quad is freedom and rule of law. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, responsibility-free nation of the freedom must be united one. So against the totalitarian regimes for sustainable peace and prosperity. So the US, Korea-Japan cooperation is a key for economics, security, and technology. However, as Dr. Shin mentioned a little bit, among the Japanese government officers, there's a deep distrust the Korean, South Korea to join Quad. So the framework of Indo-Pacific cooperation was originally suggested by Japanese Prime Minister Abe, 2007. So for 15 years, Japanese government really tried to make, advocate this one framework, trust building among Quad nations. At the same time, the history issue is a huge headache. Actually, Yasukuni Shrine, Comfort Woman, and also forced labor compensations made a huge damage between Japan and Korea. And even among the civil society, the pro-North group changed to anti-Korea now. So especially the President Moon's abandonment of the agreement between Abe and Park Geun-hye's 2015 agreement of Comfort Woman. That was like really a huge damage, even civil society. So then, at the time, actually, current Prime Minister Kishida, he was foreign minister, actually. So but the agreement was broken. So then, so Korea joined. I hope joined, but very difficult situation will happen for such a Japanese leaders. Also at the time, really, so a lot of obstacles inside the LDP, same party. Also, same as Park Geun-hye in Korea, also a lot of obstacles, but that was broken. So then, actually, public opinion also will make pressure to the agreement not to allow Korea join Quad. So also last year, poll Japanese cabinet by Japanese cabinet office, the 37% Japanese didn't think Korea as an important country. So in contrast, 98% of Japanese think USA as important country. That's the too much difference. The US administration strategically has a strong interest in improve Japan and Korea relation internationally. Then how we can make it? So we make 3 suggestions. One, for greater purpose, Japan and Korea for go forward improve the cooperation relation. So should not harm competitors of each other. So Japan think Korea as competitors. That's why like such a Japanese officers hesitate to it. But this crisis on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China's cooperation with Russia, also North Korea's missile launches make change in the governmental officers of both to cooperate each other and BRS of cooperation like COVID or technology or economy by US initiative. The greater opportunity of President Biden's visit to Korea and Japan together will change such a narrow mindset of nationalistic narrow mind to the realistic benefit or greater benefit prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. So the President Yoon actually welcomed Japanese Prime Minister, Foreign Minister Hayashi. Actually, second time, a second welcome. So before the Chinese Vice Prime Minister Wang Qishan. So that is also before this Moon administration, China first, later Japan. Now back to Japan, then China. So also there's a meeting with Japanese Diet member and also Korean business persons. So they really asking the business cooperation strongly. So then the US-Korea-Japan alliance needs common goals as a corporate with a clear vision, right, and the words of alliance. So we using alliance, it means alliance have to have enemy, right? So who is the enemy? So this enemy is such a so making alliance for the protection of the enemy, right? So then its enemy is the totalitarian regimes. So not global citizen of the any entire Asian citizens. So we must separate the totalitarian regime and the people who suffered under the regime in North Korea, China, or Russia. So the Trilateral cooperation will be the strong core of such a freedom and prosperity of the people of Indo-Pacific area. So for bright future. So also the amazing story I heard the Japanese diplomats and Korean diplomats. So will be the first friends in the international field if they out of their own country. And also many changes, exchanges also now will happen after the COVID restriction, like improvement of such emotion greatly. So for example, like student exchange, also travel and culture exchange. I hope such a civil society will greater. Also, secondly, I suggest the Marshall Plan for East Asia. So Global Peace Foundation actually, we promoting the Marshall Plan idea for North Korean issue. So Japanese actually at the time, like after World War II, so asked every cities, right? But amazingly, U.S. administration helped such a like so bottom of Japan to give aid to Japan. So then now wonderful alliance with U.S.-Japan alliance. So also, as you may know, Marshall Plan was an American initiative. So 1948 that provide foreign aid to European country. Now Europe and USA was great ally. So such a thing I hope will happen. And also like Indo-Pacific US-led Indo-Pacific Cooperation Economic Framework, IPF, or like Quad. I hope that this great cooperation will happen. And the third point, the free and unified Korea solution with to human rights denuclearization. As a Kurt Campbell, like 2006, he told at CSIS, one Korea is the only way to solve North Korean denuclearization. Also, one so former ambassador Dr. Indo Khan, so he also suggested so if Japan accept help one Korea of Korean Peninsula, so Korea's Han means resentment to Japan will be solved. Such opportunity I will see, but so I maybe time is not so good. So I want to suggest that the human rights agenda is important because without freedom in North Korea, actually the so CBI, the important is investigate. Freedom is investigate. If we cannot invest North Korea, it's CBI cannot happen. Also, China actually CCP with grow up with such an economy. So it means if we cannot change North Korean regime, it means if we aid to North Korea, it means eventually strong North Korea will retaliate women to us. That's also a huge problem. So that's why we should focus on rule of law, so human rights, and the freedom in North Korea. So we should focus on first North Korean regime has to change.
Right.
Now you recent news said, right? So COVID, North Korea, Kim Jong admitted. So now 1.5 million cases. So that is a big chance we can change North Korean regime. Just not only just negotiation, but also we should ask the change the system of North Korea. That's very important.
Excellent.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sawai, for your perspective and a very detailed description of the actual diplomatic exchanges and the potential of this moment. So I'd like, because everyone has a very busy schedule, and we also want to make sure that we're well focused to try and keep this event within an hour and a half. So I'd like to ask each of the participants to make a brief final statement regarding what's been brought up, what you think is most central, most critical to highlight, and then we'll just, if there are any closing questions, we can take them and then conclude. So we'll go back to John Pfeffer in Washington, D.C. Your brief concluding comments.
Well, thank you, first of all, for all the presentations, which were all very interesting. And but inevitably, I will respond to what I last heard because that's what I remember. So, Mr. Sawai, of course, that's what you said. And there were two things that I thought were quite interesting. One, you emphasized that an alliance is built on threat perception, of course, and there has to be, in some sense, an enemy for an alliance to hold together. That was the nature of NATO, for instance, with the Soviet threat. And it's, of course, the nature of the US ROK alliance as well, with North Korea primarily as the threat. But what I would like to emphasize is the importance of transforming an understanding of alliance in our current moment away from perceiving the enemy as another country and rather understand the threat as coming from a common threat. A common threat in this case being COVID, a pandemic, climate change, economic immiseration. I mean, these are topics that, for instance, transcend any particular military alliance. It's something that the United States and China can cooperate on climate change, for instance, addressing it. It's something that the United States, South Korea, and North Korea can cooperate with to address the pandemic. Okay, so that all sounds nice and all, and I would like to see, you know, national governments understand threat in that more inclusive sense. But I did want to say one last thing, and that is the thing you ended on, Mr. Sawai, and that is the importance of regime change in North Korea. Now, granted, I do not like the current regime in North Korea, and I do embrace the importance of human rights and encouraging human rights in North Korea. But I would ask you, well, what do you imagine will be the substitute for the current regime in North Korea? In Eastern Europe, we had plenty of, you know, dissent, dissidents. We had plenty of organizations that could produce the kind of leaders that would replace what were then the communist governments. In North Korea, to be honest, and I'm sure all of you know North Korea better than I do, what is the most powerful institution other than the current government? That would be the military. If we saw regime change in North Korea, it's most likely to be replaced by an even possibly worse institution, the military taking over from the party. So I think we have to be very careful about recommending regime change strategies for North Korea in the absence of any really viable alternative. And you might say, well, a US occupying force or a South Korean occupying force? We all know the strength of North Korean nationalism, a nationalism that transcends communism or any kind of narrow political ideology. I don't think the North Koreans would be enthusiastic about either of those occupying forces. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for your concluding comments. And let's go on. Professor Shin, your brief response.
Okay, the first of all, we have to have some reconciliation with Japan. As you know, our former president was very bad position against Japan, and then he was leaning to the China, but South Korea was has some many struggles with China and Japan and the US also. So the new government we have, I hope the new government is having some new vision to the some more liberal democracies. You know, so in front of the some invasion of the Russian and China and those kind of threat is in front of us in Korea. So we have to have some strong alliances with Japan and the US, and also including the India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and something, some other countries also. So we have to develop our some common value based some alliances like a free democratic society or free trade, some freedom of religion or something like that. Based on those some common value systems, so we also can develop our more powerful alliances with those countries, Japan and the United States and India and Indonesia and the US. So we have to plan those some value-based some alliances in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shin. And let's return then to Dr. Singh with Dr. Singh's perspective on in conclusion.
Thank you, sir. As I said in my opening remarks, I feel very strongly that there should be some consistency in the policy of three countries. What happens, when there is a sudden change in the policy? For example, sometimes Americans are talking about a free trade, they're talking about economic institutions. Suddenly, Mr. Trump dumped it. So whole region was left or lost. So that cannot be, it's doing more damage than good to the region. So we have to have a kind of institutional mechanism through that there's a consensus, kind of continuity, some consistency on some important policy issues. North Korea, economic security, global challenges. These are issues which needs to be handled at a long-term basis. You simply cannot change your policy with the change of administration. If you do that, our opponents benefit from it. Sometimes they do more damage to us because of our refusal or our inability to keep our stand. So now Mr. Biden has to think from longer term perspective. This point must be understood that China, North Korea are exploiting the differences and exploiting our democratic weaknesses. This is very critical. It's very critical because we do not was able to do the free trade agreement. China created its own institution. Now they are deeply integrated in Southeast Asia. It's very difficult, You have to have a kind of a consistency, continuity of the foreign policy. So if you really want to have a stronger partnership, you have to create a institutional mechanism through which three countries, Korea, Japan, and USA, can have long-term perspective, long-term policy. Once the policy changes with the change of government, it do more damage, and our rivals are able to exploit it. So I'm suggesting that Mr. Biden should pay proper attention. And most important point is the reconciliation between Japan and Korea.
Right.
Americans simply cannot afford to ignore this issue. There's some serious tension. Koreans feel very strongly about our legacy, about historical issues. Even though they are very small from the foreign perspective, but for local Koreans, this issue is too emotional, too sentimental. So I think when President Biden is here, he should invest some energy, some resources, some time in solving this problem, try to create some kind of good feeling among three countries. Until these two countries not unite, all other things are just empty. So again and again, I'm coming back to the point that economic cooperation, security cooperation, and North Korea, all these are meaningless until we don't have a basic understanding. So these three countries, being democracy, should be in a position to create a institutional mechanism through which long-term policy can be created and sustained. North Korea is very clever. He knows that sometimes there's a pro-North Korea government in Korea, South Korea sometimes anti-North Korea. So they create their policy according to that. So they're exploiting. See, now they have full-fledged nuclear program. They have this intercontinental missiles, supersonic missiles. This kind of how North Korea is able to do this, because North Korea is able to explore the differences between partners, right, and they was able to benefit from it. And this can continue if you not pay the proper attention. So my point is that Mr. Biden should pay more attention to the structural problem in the alliance. Structural problem is that there is no consistency. Time has come to create a structure, to create an institutional mechanism through which experts, long-term experts, take a decision. And it should be decision taken by this long-term strategic commission should be binding on all three countries. It should not be changed just because of political opinion. Must you change your preferences because of political preferences? It not help us. So experts, long-term perspective should be adopted, and this temporary political basis should be avoided. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Singh. And I wish institutions worked as nicely as you imagine. Unfortunately, we're in a historical moment of institutional decay across the board, I would say. But let us hope that in the next generation going forward, that such strong, substantial institutions can be built. Mr. Tharp, your closing comments. Turn on your mic, please.
Yeah, what if a tree fell and no one could hear it? Anyway, I firmly believe we need some kind of a decent policy to deal with North Korea. I think since the armistice was signed in 1953 and the fighting stopped, that gave us a reason not to push for a solution too quick. And so in the last 70 years, we've been following what I call a kick the can policy of dealing with North Korea. Let's let the next guy do it, and maybe it'll fix itself. And that's unfortunate. But in the meantime, I think these alliances to at least keep North Korea at bay are very important. But it does involve trust in each other. And we don't have that trust because we see the world differently. I spent 20 years on the 4-star generals staff at UNC Combined Forces Command and U.S. Forces Korea. And when new officers would come in and be walking around with this confused look on their face because they couldn't understand what was going on, I would say, hey, it's easy. It's as the Koreans say, 동성이몽, or same bed, different dreams. Right. And that's what this triangular alliance would be. It'd be three of us in the same bed, dreaming different dreams, but trying to get to the same solution. So, thank you.
Very well put. Usually that expression is not a threesome, but it's very vivid. Thank you. And Mr. Sawai, your final comments about our discussion and your advice.
So thank you, Mr. Pfeffer, John Pfeffer. I emphasize the enemy, but I'm actually Global Peace Foundation, peace organization. I don't really doesn't like any really fighting. Also, even like blood nose strategy also, that's very dangerous to making war. So I don't like it. I hope that like Japan emperor really slender, and he declared himself as a human. I'm not God. So so North Korean people really pride is very high, really high. So even from outside, like Japanese occupation time, even like from in North Korea, lot of like facilities they are actually industrialized by Japan, but that they don't appreciate, of course. So then I hope North Korean people themselves change by themselves. So it means like now not just sanction the information into North Korea, and I hope such a top level people or people really by themselves change the system. Then that is my best hope, really peaceful transition. I shouldn't say that, so regime change, shouldn't be regime transfer. I should say like that. I hope transfer by themselves. I hope so. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Salai, for your comments and your clarification. This visit of President Biden can be read at multiple levels. It is a very specific, standard visit to update for both sides, or three sides, to assess what the priorities of each administration is, and to talk about some of the details, whether it's about THAAD, North Korea, Russia, China, or other issues. But it also has a larger historical moment, which we find the United States in a rather difficult, overextended position, and facing what obviously don't want, which is a conflict with both Russia and China at the same time. But it also has an even larger significance that we're going back in a way to the situation from the Opium Wars, when the Western culture, Western science, Western approaches to technology became a sort of global standard from the 1850s, 1860s on, and now Asia has asserted itself certainly as a par with Europe and the United States, and for that matter, Russia, in terms of level of education, level of technology, economic influence. And so where there's a sort of larger, massive shift taking place as well. If there were any, we have a couple minutes. Was there anybody out there who had any final questions they wanted to ask anyone specifically regarding what they had, what that presenter, that participant had stated?
So
Please.
I have question to Lieutenant Colonel Top. So now Korean Americans so also asking U.S. government the declaration of end of war. So how do you think about that?
We need to have a peace treaty between the North and the South, I believe, before we have an end of declaration of war. But anything can work. You know, the way the armistice agreement states it is this agreement will stay in place until replaced by an agreement signed by the political parties concerned, something like that. Big disagreement on who that means. We always thought that it meant, as a minimum, North and South, and maybe the U.S. and China, since we provided the majority of combatants on each side, in addition to the Koreans. Some people think it's a lot more people. But the North Koreans think it's just the United States and North Korea. And so it's not something that I think that we sign. It's something that the North and South has to sign, a peace treaty or something to replace the armistice. The only thing that an end of war declaration would do would create confusion and probably lead to a weaker deterrence posture by maybe withdrawal of U.S. forces from Korea.
Right.
So I have one question for Professor Shin.
Please.
Yeah. Okay, Professor Shin, I want to know your view. Given President Yoon is very strongly tilted towards USA. So what do you think? What should be done? What Korea can do to protect its economic interest with China? What should be South Korea's policy towards China now? And what are the protection mechanism against Chinese economic retaliation?
Okay, a new president of Korea has criticized the former foreign policy to China and the U.S. And I think he will change his foreign policy, which is fostering the early alliance system with the U.S. and also Japan. And also, as Mr. Steve Stops mentioned about some end of some war declaration is not desirable in this situation because if that is some intention of the North Korean strategies, if we have some end of war declaration in Korean Peninsula and then there's no cause or there's no reasons for the U.S. troops staying in South Korea. And that is the main purpose for the end of war declaration, which is pursued by the North Korea and some of the South Korean with some pro-North Koreans. And so, but this new government has a very different style or different direction against that former President Moon. So we have some desirable hope for the near future and about some new alliance system with U.S. and Japan.
My question was to what extent South Korea can get economic security from Trilateral alliance against China, because President Yoon is talking about economic security. So is it really possible to secure economic interests of Korea? Because as soon as President Yoon start moving towards the USA, Chinese retaliation is for sure. So it's just a matter of time when China started reacting angrily. So what are the mechanisms at the disposal of a South Korean government to protect its immediate economic interest? What do you think? What should be done?
As you know, the Korea has to be, Korea depends on the development and trading system with China and the free world, including U.S. The total values of trading with China exceed that of the trade of the U.S. and other countries. So China is also very important to the Korean development. But this is one thing. Another thing is security affairs. Economic affairs is one thing. Security affairs is another. So even though the Korea has to focus on developing their country, developing their countries and also relation with China, but their system and their purpose of the country of China is very different from that of South Korea. So we have to have a very clear limit about the relation between China and Korea, like Australia. Even though the China retaliated Australia on posing some Australian Australian some rebuke about the some Wuhan corona and virus system, and then they stopped to import their coals from Australia. But after 2 years, the China has been struggled with the lack of some energy, including coals, and then they degraded or diminished their plant power, electricity power production, and their economics have some very difficulties. And then China went to the Australia and please sell your coals to China again, like that. Even though Korea depends on China with many some exporting values and goods, but we have to have a very clear limit with the relationship with China and Korea, something like that.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Thank you.
Understood. Well, listen, I want to thank again everybody for taking the time to join us today. President Biden will arrive tomorrow and then go to Tokyo thereafter, and there'll be the Quad meeting in Tokyo, and we'll, I'm sure, be very, very granular discussion of what can actually be done. I just wanted to, in closing, remark that it is my sincere hope that there will be discussion of other forms of exchanges, not just trade and security, but that in education, in exchanges between citizens in China, in Japan, the United States, and in South Korea, between artists, writers, creative people, handicapped people, any number of other groups who are very human and who have so much in common, that we can also have those sorts of exchanges to make sure that we have a truly robust and a cultural, spiritual, and human sense. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to the next Asia Institute seminar.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Chen, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.